Welcome everybody to today's presentation by Ideal Life 360. And of course, this is our series that we're running on the Vital Lifelong Alignment. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to either join us for each of the preceding 3 webinars, or you've had an opportunity to watch the replays. For any of you joining us, if you haven't yet had access or the opportunity to see those and you're having some challenges with that, don't forget to email me, brad@ideallife360.com, and we'll see about getting you all of the proper links for that. You should be receiving announcements both pre and post webinars. Now we think we've got that sorted out so that you have all the proper links, passwords, etc. So where have we been? And where are we going? Well, we're going to be talking today about escaping the deadly myths, and it's a great prelude to our lesson next week on habits of successful centenarians. But again, we have also gone through a full possibilities explosion exercise, rapid reset, as well as discussed the vitality principles. And this is an opportunity. You're gonna see a lot of things today that may look familiar. And again, this is part of the reinforcement. So there'll be some new information that we're presenting today, but you'll also see some things that probably will seem familiar. If you happen to have your possibilities explosion handy or your rapid reset handy, that's fine. That might be something that you want to refer to. If you don't worry. You're not necessarily going to need that. But what I would encourage each of you to do is take out a piece of paper and a pen, because you may want to jot a few things down. Because one of the things that I would like to challenge you with as we go through our time today is, are you starting to self-identify that certain of the inevitable myths that exist, are they present in your life? Are there things that have either existed in the past that you've overcome, and we need to congratulate and acknowledge that we've been able to do that? Or there are things that currently exist in your life, whether you recognize it or possibly just suspect that might be present in your thinking or your habits or your deeds. So let's get into lesson 4, which is escaping the deadly myths. And again, this is part of the Vital Lifelong Alignment program that I'm so happy to be able to present. So in the video, Mark talked a little bit about the fish, the goldfish in the bowl, and said that you kept showing this item. And one of the things that you may know about goldfish is that they will grow only as large as their environment will allow. And there is a really common theme with regard to the way that we live, and it has to do with a concept that we'll explore a little deeper, which is the culturally conforming conveyor belt, cultural comas, or simply conformity. And that is, we tend to get really, really comfortable. But what we want to do through this program and your participation in the Vital Lifelong Alignment is to expand your environment so that you can naturally grow into the environment that you're presented with. So here I'm presenting a bit of a twist on that graphic. Instead of being a big goldfish in a little bowl, let's just get into a bigger bowl. And that's where we're going to go today. So we're going to jump from one bowl to the next bowl and just keep expanding the size of our environment and our personal growth. So this should look like a graphic that we have seen in the past, but let's talk a little bit about this. If we were to stop a whole bunch of people on the street and ask them to please show me, graph for me, vitality versus age, and then expressing some form of what I'll call a minimum threshold for vitality, what might that graph look like? Well, what we have pictured here, because you probably couldn't make out some of those charts as they were kind of rolling through the video as Mark was presenting, But what we have here is vitality versus age. And then we've got drawn on there a yellow line with a T on it. And that's what we're just going to arbitrarily consider to be a minimum threshold for vitality and your ability to just be self-sufficient. And if you were to ask most people to draw the arc, the curve, or the line that represents vitality over time, what you'll get oftentimes is this red line. And you'll notice that individuals seem to peak our vitality between ages 40 and maybe 50, 55. And then it starts to decline. And then by the time we're 80, we have no vitality. And I would assume that that means that we're dead. However, that's what's happening right now. But what we know is what science has told us is that what's possible and what's certainly should be expected is the green line. So again, I'm going to come back to this in a later slide, but look at this red line, which is what most people's perception is of what life is like. And let's look at the green line. And the green line is what science says is possible. So what is the comparison of that? And that is that the green line, what science tells us is possible, is that number one, our vitality not only ramps up sooner and faster and at a much more rapid pace in comparison to what most people will draw, it peaks much higher, and then its decline is much slower all the way out to age 100 and beyond. And in fact, most scientists will tell you that we are at our peak vitality by our late 20s, and that there is no reason why we should lose more than just 1% or so of vitality over the next ensuing decades, such that by the time you're in your 80s, 90s, and even to 100, that your vitality couldn't and shouldn't be at 80+%. But what's happened since we've created this totally human invented concept of retirement is we've retreated from the green line back to the perception that people have, which is the red line. So what are we doing here? Why are you on this call? You're on this call because you're a difference maker. You want to make a difference in your life and the lives of other individuals. And what you want to do is you want to have the tools. You recognize that, our culture and the way that we've been taught and the way that we've been living probably is exerting a lot of external forces on us to have us live that red line, when what we want to do is we want to live that green line, but what we don't know how to do is to get there. And that's the point of this program. Those are the exercises that we're providing you, the transformational learning exercises that you're experiencing by going through those programs. So we like to ask the questions. We call them the 3 most important questions you've never been asked. And that is, be honest, which of these 2 lines are you currently living your life into? Which one would you like to live your life into? I'm thinking if you're hanging in here with me, the answer is pretty obvious. And then the most important question that you have to ask is, and how will you know? What are some of the measurements that we're going to be taking into consideration as we go forward in this particular pursuit? And here is probably the most important thing to take away from today. It's your choice. You get to choose by your habits, your actions, and your mindset as to which of those 2 lines that you want to live into. But here's the thing that I'm going to share with you. It doesn't mean it's easy. You just can't think your way into being in the best shape of your life, or having great relationships, or having all the money that you need, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to take some work, but it is our choice. So what is that powerful force that exists out there? Well, we refer to it as the culturally conforming conveyor belt. And I'm going to give you some additional resources. This is not stuff that's completely made up. Mark didn't sit around there and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to invent a new way of thinking. What he really did was curate some of the best content from some of the best minds in the areas of longevity. And he melded that with 40 years of experience in actuarial science, which is what he did for a living to come up with this program. And so it's called the culturally conforming conveyor belt. It's that powerful force that exists for us to conform. And it's contributing to what we call the killer Ds. That red line that we see in those prior graphs really encourage and support early mental and social disengagement, accelerated physical decline, and premature death. That is what that red line and the culturally conforming conveyor belt has done in our society. So we want to make sure that we are taking steps to counter that. And one of the resources of the three that are not part of this program that I want you to potentially consider looking into as additional resources is this one called the Mind Body Code by Dr. Mario Martinez. And in that, there's lots of phenomenal wisdom, but the subtitle of the series is How the Mind Wounds and Heals the Body. And among the elements that he talks about in this book is that growing older is inevitable. Every day that we live, we are growing older. But aging, the concept of aging and our mindset around aging is 100% completely optional. And that's the perspective that we want to take as we're going through this program and doing all these exercises and achieving the results that you want to achieve. So what is one of the clear signs that the culturally conforming conveyor belt is having a negative impact on our society and on us individually? Well, it can be summed up in two basic phrases. The first one is things that should be considered normal are considered abnormal, and things that should be considered abnormal are considered normal. So what are some specific examples? Well, let's talk about them. You know, in the United States here, we have an issue with people who are overweight or even obese. But you know what? That is something that should be considered to be abnormal. But guess what? We've kind of accepted it. It's just kind of, well, you know, that's just the way that it is. And that is an example. How about the concept that we just talked about? This man-made concept of retirement, a completely man-made, invented thing. There was many, many centuries that people worked until they just didn't work anymore. And that basically was the day that they died. And then we came along and we've talked about how retirement came about in the late 1800s in Germany, and then how that's been perpetuated in our own society through Social Security. And so this concept of, retirement, well, of course, that's normal, right? But that's really abnormal. It's abnormal if you look at the history of man. This concept of retirement, only about 150 years old, certainly in comparison as long as man has been around, is not normal. This concept that, older people are not capable, right? That they need help with their bags. They need to, I'll get that for you, etc. There's a classic example of buying into the culturally conforming conveyor belt versus simply providing them with the choice that they have to do that. And here are a few pictures to illustrate what we would consider to be completely normal, right? It's what should be normal, but society would say, wow, look at that. Middle-aged or older couple having fun, together, perhaps somebody who is fully engaged, well past what some people consider their prime in the pursuit of a career, being engaged in a loving, supportive relationship, enjoying phenomenal activities. And we'll talk a little bit about another example later, but these are the sorts of things that people would say, wow, that's just not normal. But this is what normal is. This is what normal should look like. And we should accept nothing less than these sorts of things if that's what you want to do. But like I said, it's going to take some work. So let's dive into what some of those things look like. So if you watched the video, you saw Mark share with you the example of John B. that we affectionately in the Vital Lifelong Alignment refer to as the airplane man. So this story, and it's been told many times, I've heard it. I may not do it the same justice that Mark has, because Mark is the one who experienced this firsthand. And essentially, Mark was in the very early days of developing this material, and he was on a flight and he sat next to somebody and they got to talking. And essentially what happened was this individual was a very successful business individual who was kind of buying into this whole concept of retirement, and was a real avid golfer and wanted to essentially experience more golf. And so, this concept that we oftentimes discuss in our program, which is that of a permanent vacation, retirement being a permanent vacation, he was kind of buying into that. And as a result of that, it kept being encouraged. Why don't you retire? Why don't you retire? And so he chose to semi-retire because he owned the business and kind of kept one foot in there. But what he was also finding is that through this whole process, he wasn't as active. He wasn't as engaged as he thought he was going to be. He started to experience some health issues. There were some stresses on relationships, and he was experiencing some disengagement issues. He just wasn't, as engaged with life and the people that he was doing on a day-to-day basis. And at the conclusion of that conversation that he was having with Mark, he basically said, my retirement is killing me. And so one of the things that Mark did is he helped John B. Through this program. And here's what the transformation looked like. John B. went through the exact same process that you're going through. He started with a possibilities explosion exercise. He did a rapid reset. He started to understand what the vitality principles were. He understood and recognized how to escape the deadly myths. All the things that we are working through as part of this program is part of what you can look forward to. So what was John B.'s transformation, the airplane man? Well, he re-engaged in leading his business. He said, you know what? I'm not going to semi-retire. I'm going to get back. I'm going to get engaged. That doesn't mean I have to be here every single day or every single week or every single month, but I'm going to be engaged in leading this business. He addressed his health issues. He was having some heart issues, and he got those addressed. He spent the time and recognized that he was straining some of his family relationships, and he took action to repair those family relationships. And among the things that he was having a difficult time justifying was keeping his favorite vacation home. He decided that he was going to keep that favorite vacation home. His comment at the end of this transformation was, it totally changed my life. This is the best I've felt in years. And that's what we want to do for you. We want to move you from wherever it is that you are to make 2020 not just your best year, but your best decade ever. So what we want to inspire you to do is that you, if you want everything that you can have, and you can have whatever it is that you want. I oftentimes say, ask for what you want and then expect to get it. You will need to overcome the most power inevitability myths that keep us all living in a cultural coma and complacently riding the culturally conforming conveyor belt. We do this without even thinking about it. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those myths are and some action steps that we can take to overcome them. So number one, so we're going to go through nine of the most powerful inevitability myths that exist. And we're going to back it up with a few stats that go along with that. So most of us, at least before you got introduced to the possibilities explosion exercise, think that we will die before we actually will. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from media, as an example. Every single year, at some point during the year, typically in January, February, when they have the opportunity to tally up all the results from the prior year, they say great news or not so good news. The average life expectancy in the United States has either increased or decreased. In fact, 3 years in a row, it's decreased. That is largely due to suicide, largely as a result of the opioid addiction crisis, as well as some stressors associated with our servicemen and women serving overseas and coming back home, as well as obesity and issues associated with that. However, that is the at-birth number, and we're going to talk a lot about that. We've expressed that before, and part of the reasons I'm reinforcing this is we've got to get this into your lexicon, into your language, and into your way of thinking. 85, by the way, is the average life expectancy for a U.S. 65-year-old. So if you've already made it to 65, you're blowing away by far the at-birth number, which is in 76 to 78 range. But again, what does life expectancy refer to? Even when we talk about the at-birth number or the 85 as the average life expectancy for 65-year-olds, it means that's half of the common population. So if you're a common element of the U.S. population, there is 50% of the population is still alive at age 85. Only half of the population of 65-year-olds have died at or before 85. And common, by the way, does not include specific demographics. And you can consider yourselves to be in a special demographic. Why? Because you're involved in this program. So some of those special demographics include such things as your education, your income, your marital status, your sex, your health, and your race. These are all things that are demographics that either add to or subtract from life expectancy. But what we've shared here are all things that can have a very positive effect on your longevity. So the number one inevitable myth is that we are actually going to live longer than we think we are going to live. Number two, big, gigantic myth. Declines in health are inevitable, they're permanent, and they're irreversible. That is simply not true. You may not ever get back to where you once were. For most individuals, that is possible. But again, it takes effort. I ask the question, are you willing to do the work the goals require? And this is certainly one of those things that it would take. You do not have to succumb to your current state if you're not happy with where your current state is. You can reverse and improve your particular situation. Why do we know this? Well, first thing that we know is your body is constantly regenerating itself, especially if you provide it the opportunity to do so. How do we do that? Adequate amount of sleep, correct diet, and we regenerate cells. You are not the same person you are today that you were yesterday. You have regenerated millions of cells during that period of time. When you make it to your 70s and 80s, even without doing anything special, the body rises to the challenge and resists age-related illnesses. So you just need to know that, again, you are not stuck in whatever state that you is. There are hundreds of thousands of examples that we could find of individuals you may know or you may heard of that are being vibrant, active, and impactful in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. So we know that's possible. We know the human body is capable of far more than we give it credit for. It's an amazing, amazing machine. Number three, The rate at which you age is determined by your genes. I have a question that I love to ask individuals. And before we get into this and support this, I'll talk about that question. I'll ask the question, so how old will you be on the day that you die? And that question is oftentimes answered I typically get two responses. One response is I'll get something that's very close to what we'll call the at-birth average number, right? So something in their mid to late 70s. And then I'll have some individuals, as an example, that will give me a much higher number, being 90, 95. So I always like to ask, where are they coming up with that number and what is informing them with regard to that? And I will share with you that in the case of individuals who answer something in the mid to late 70s, it comes from two sources. Number one, either they heard it on the radio, that's the average age, or they have seen and experienced somebody who did not age well. And so their perception around aging is very negative, right? We all grow old. Aging is optional. So the issue is they've had a negative experience. On the flip side, when somebody answers the question, I think I'll live till I'm 95, I said, what informs you of that particular decision? And inevitably, the answer that I get is, well, my parents or grandparents or great-grandparents all lived until fill in the blank, 95, 98, 100, 102, 103. And so what does that tell you about yourself is the question I ask. Is, well, I come from a very strong gene pool. And then I lay this on them. This is a hangover from a concept referred to as genetic determinism. And that has been basically totally debunked. But there is an explanation, and I'm going to share with you what it is. And that is that what those individuals have experienced is they have observed what's possible. And as a result, it's shifted their mindset over the concept of how long somebody can live and how people can age. So geneticists now say it's as low as 3%, but no more than 25%. And the recent consensus has landed on the mid to low teens, somewhere in the 13 to 15% range. So the good news is there's less than 1 in 6 of the variables, 1/6, less than 1/6 of the variable of genetics plays into your longevity. That means that we are largely in control as to the choices that we make so that we can avoid what individuals called genetic roulette. How you act, right? How you act immediately turns on and off genetic predisposition. This is the science that's known as epigenetics, probably one of the most well-respected and researched and written individuals on this particular topic is Dr. Joe Dispenza. His signature piece of work, he speaks all over the world on this particular topic, is You Are the Placebo is the name of his book. And the subtitle of that book is Making Your Mind Matter. And again, this is the discussion of the science of epigenetics. And here is one of the examples. If you're eating unhealthy, you're telling your body, I'm ready to die. Essentially, you're not supporting all of the genetic predispositions for you to have the best possible physiological outcome. And that's just one of the examples that's discussed in this body of work. Number 4, one of my favorite ones. I was just featured on a podcast for the 100-Year Lifestyle where I talked about the prime time myth. And that is number 4, which is ages 25 to 55 are your prime productive years. I refer to this as the prime time myth. This is a holdover from the pre-industrial revolution. This is when man and woman was machine. And when you're digging ditches and lifting things and you are the machine, our bodies weren't intended to be hard labor for our entire lifetime, and you could become pretty worn out. And during that period of our history, yes, indeed, age 25 to 55 were the prime productive years, but is that what we do anymore? The answer is no. We live in a service, information, and good for all of us on this call, a wisdom economy. And as a result of that, that doesn't have to do whatsoever with digging ditches or lifting steel girders or, spending long days, scrubbing laundry, picking crops in the fields, etc. And so what does that mean? That means that the new prime time is 55 to 80 and beyond. And this is why this whole concept of retirement and a permanent vacation is so incredibly dangerous, because it ignores the economy that we live in today, and it ignores some of the vital, or from last week, the vitality principles that we all want to live in. So number 4 is ages 25 to 55 are the prime productive years. Not true. The new prime time, 55 to 80 and beyond. Now, there are several components to myth number 5, and the end will always be grim. So this is the perspective that those individuals that I shared with you when I asked the question, so what is your perception of when you will die? And they give me something in the mid to late 70s. This is what they're thinking of. They are buying into this myth that the end will always be grim. The vast majority of what we as a society call old age has nothing whatsoever to do with age. It's really sickness. How do we know this? Well, we know this because many of the people, approximately half, who live past age 100 are healthy, they're happy, and they're engaged. And so this is just a little preview of what we'll be talking about next time we're together, because next time we're going to talk about the secrets of successful centenarians. So what is one of those secrets of that? Well, somewhere midlife, around 50, right? And so if you're going to have a midlife crisis in your 40s to 50s, then that's midlife, right? That means you're only halfway through. But somewhere around age 50, they get off the culturally conforming conveyor belt. They realize that, you know what, this doesn't work for me. This is not the way life was supposed to be. There is more for me out there. I'm going to shun what culture tells me I need to do, and I'm going to live the life that I want to live. So that's the first part of myth number 5. The end will always be grim. Here's the next part. There will be a vast diminishment of physical strength. Now, I think this is when Mark talked about I think it was a cyclist, right, who was in his 80s and got some professional training and actually ended up being stronger than he was and becoming more vital, and not only with the improvement of technique, but his strength and his vitality was significantly able to improve. You can maintain the strength and vitality of a 50-year-old, but it is a use it or lose it deal, which means that you've got to work at it, right? The science is there, the physiology is there. We're built to do this, but we've got to get there, and then we've got to maintain it. So many of you have been to Ideal Life Day in the past, and one of my guest speakers from a couple of years ago was the director of the Longevity Medical Clinic, Dr. Jerry Mixon. And this is the website for Longevity Medical Clinic. As a full disclosure, this happens to be the naturopathic practice that I visit. But there are many naturopathic individuals out there. And what is the premise that the Longevity Medical Clinic uses? And that is that normal stinks. In other words, you don't want to be normal. What you want to be is you want to be optimal. Because if we look at what the guidelines are in our modern Western medicine for what's normal, they consider, overweight, high blood pressure, on a bunch of statin drugs and whatnot for a, late 50s, early 60s-year-old to be normal, right? This is another example of the things that should be abnormal are considered normal. So normal stinks. You don't want to be normal. You want to be optimal. This is situations where I've had clients who have had knee surgeries, hip surgeries, that made them stronger than they ever were in the past. And by the way, if you're contemplating one of these surgeries, I can tell you that the advances in technology have made recovery from that ridiculously short in comparison to what it used to be even 5, 10, 15 years ago. And that one of the common comments that I get from individuals is, why did I wait so long? I want to share with you another concept. Some of you know that I had the opportunity to mentor with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Lance Secretan, a leadership guru who is an author of a dozen and a half or 24 books on the particular subject. A very, very inspiring individual, and I consider it a great privilege and honor to consider him to be a friend. He introduced me to basically what I'll call the Dr. Jerry Mixon of Canada, Dr. Randy Nipping. And he runs a clinic in Canada called Deerfield. So if any of our listeners are from Canada or want to go to Canada, Dr. Randy Nipping runs deerfields.ca. And same sort of concept that they do at Deerfields in Canada is this same kind of concept. And by the way, Dr. Mixon and Dr. Nipping know one another. I found that out in talking to Dr. Nipping about that. But it basically reinforces that there are medical practitioners who actually assist their patients and assist their clients in achieving the green line. That is their goal. The practice of these two physicians, and there are hundreds across North America that practice this kind of medicine, are all about helping you live into the green line. Here's another myth within number 5, the end will always be grim, and that mental acuity always declines. Again, not true. Engagement, purpose, and relationships can keep you as sharp as ever until the day you die. I can share with you that I know the names of several clients. I can rattle off the top of my head that are in their mid to late 90s. They're an incredible inspiration to me. I always say I want to be just like them. They are examples that I want to live into. And I suspect that if we started to do a forensic study of how they live their life, they will have adopted many of the concepts that we're talking about here, as well as probably have many of the traits of successful centenarians. If you stay in shape, your chances of staying sharp are improved. So that's another element is are we preparing our body, right, to live the life that it was designed to live, or are we doing irreparable harm to it by the choices that we are making? So that's something that we want to make a cognizant effort to understand and to recognize. And then another one under number 5, the end will always be grim. If you live long enough, you will get Alzheimer's, cancer, or heart disease. Again, these types of impairments are generally not a direct result of aging. They are usually caused by injury, harmful habits, and excessive wear and tear. This means that your health is mostly dependent on taking good care of yourself throughout your life. Or if you've fallen off the bandwagon, getting back on the bandwagon and staying on the health bandwagon. So that's one of the things that we want to look at. Number 6, all improvements to longevity are thanks to medical breakthroughs. Well, you know what? Let's make a bit of acknowledgement here. Major advances in overall at birth life expectancies are due to a decline in infant mortality, childhood illness, and engineering advances such as access to clean water, vaccinations, etc. But adult life expectancy has not actually improved nearly as dramatically as the at-birth life expectancy. So what does that tell us? This is where this whole myth of aging comes from. I don't have it in this presentation, you've seen it in prior presentations, but we break down the actual at birth versus 65 year old ages. And there's another myth that's kind of a subset of this, which is life expectancy has doubled. That's not true. Life expectancy for individuals who have made it past the two most dangerous times in an individual's life, which is birth and early childhood and adolescence and young adulthood. If you can make it through those, essentially speaking, when we take that subsection out, the adult life expectancy has not changed nearly as dramatically as the at birth life expectancy. So that's an important thing to understand, and one of the powerful inevitability myths that we need to debunk. Number 7, which is playing by the cultural rules is the best way to succeed at life. Well, you know what? Some of the most successful people in our society and in the world have been rule breakers. Culture has become damaging and even dangerous to our health, happiness, productivity, and vitality. So what are some examples of that? Well, the first one is accumulating more stuff is the definition of winning. We see it everywhere. Driving fancy cars, having this and that, 3 and 4 vacation homes, etc. By the way, none of that stuff is bad. It's when the emphasis of your entire life is those sorts of things, that's what's bad. And it's this concept of accumulating more stuff is the equivalent of winning. Excessive indulgences. This is in food, alcohol, sorts of things that you shouldn't be putting into your body, and basically equating them as my just rewards. I deserve it. And as a result of that, you do that. By the way, another little preview. Occasional indulgences are okay. And in fact, what you'll find, and you listen to the next lesson, that is a trait of successful centenarians. They don't deny themselves of special celebrations and special indulgences. It's just that they don't make them routine. And then here is another area that we need to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of, which is conformity, because conformity equals comfort. And getting out of our comfort zone is one of those things that is particularly hard to do. And as a result, our culture tends to support staying in that comfort zone, staying in that routine, staying trapped into the culturally conforming conveyor belt. As I was studying some of this material, I came across a book, and I'm going to mention it here. It's called The Code of the Extraordinary Mind. It's written by an author who is the founder of Mind Valley. His name is Vishen Lakhiani. And he talks about as a concept called the culturescape. And essentially, the culturescape is a little bit like our definition of the culturally conforming conveyor belt. And he lays it out very, very well in this particular conversation of the culturescape in the Code of the Extraordinary Mind. Myth number 8. We do what we want when we want for our own reasons. We think that we manifest our own destiny. But the answer is that nothing could be further from the truth. We are living in alignment with what we experienced while being taught by parents, teachers, clergy, the media, and others. Now, this is not the blame game, right? One of the vitality principles that we talked about last time is taking personal responsibility. So this is not a dig on parents or teachers or clergy or the media. That's not what this is intended to be. It's just intended to explain, where does this come from? I do not for a moment believe that any of these people were acting with malice or ill intent. They were simply parroting what they had been taught, and we started to create this just simply way of doing it. We are doing what culture and other people expect of us. That is what we're doing. I'm going to turn my camera off for just a minute here so that you can see the full name of this author. It's Vishen Lakhiani. He wrote the book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind. And another one of the concepts, we're going to keep this rated G, but he calls them rules. And then he goes into a little greater detail and calls them the BS, and you know what that stands for, rules. And basically it is that most of what we experience in life was completely made up. Somebody said that's what we should do, and we all started following. And that is part of the danger of what we're experiencing. So number 9 of the most powerful inevitability myths. We can change by simply intellectually learning something new. Boy, if that were true, wouldn't that be great? If I simply, learned what it would be like to do all the things that you needed to do to become physically fit, to have ripped abs, to, be the strongest shape of your life. If all I had to do was read a book and then go to sleep and wake up and it'd be happen, that would be awesome. That is not the way that things work. The way you live and what you believe are the result of early experiences and a lifetime of repetition. And you can only change rapidly and permanently by replacing these experiences. And to replace them, I'm going to go off screen here for just a second. You must believe it is possible. And you must engage your emotions by repeatedly seeing and feeling the change you want to make. This is part of why the Possibilities Explosion exercise, the Rapid Reset, and some of the future exercises that we're going to do in this course are structured the way that they're structured, because they are designed specifically to engage your emotions by repeatedly seeing and feeling the change that you want to make. That is myth number 9. We cannot simply will something or intellectually cause something to happen. We have to take action. So what is another example? We showed you the example of the airplane man at the beginning of our time together. What's another example of that? Well, Mark L. I happen to know the Mark. I didn't know the airplane man, but I know Mark. Mark is the musician. He was doing what he disliked because he had to pay the bills. And I'm sure we've all potentially been in that place at some point in time. And he really had given up on his dreams of traveling, exploring, and performing because he just felt like he couldn't do that. He was no longer learning, and he was no longer spending any time on creating his own music. And the conversation that he had with his spouse was, I love you, but this life we've created feels like a prison. Wow, that's deep. And that is not a place where any of us, I'm sure, would want to be. So Mark went through, again, the same program that you are going through. So this is what is possible. And this is a little bit of what his transformation looked like. He is now living the life he's always dreamed of living. Took some guts, took some bold decisions, took a lot of conversation with his spouse about what he was going to do. But now Mark is on worldwide tours. He's in a state of constant learning, and he's recording his own original music. As a result of this, and I would imagine his attitude, probably a much nicer person to be around, his marriage is renewed. He's joyful and optimistic. And one of the things that he also recognized for both him and his spouse is they are investing significantly in their health and longevity. The comments from Mark L. was, I'm no longer stuck on a path I never wanted. And his wife commented, he's the 29-year-old guy I first met. That's a wonderful testament to the results that can come from implementing the elements of the vital lifelong alignment. So what is our goal in all this work that we're doing together? Well, the first goal that I have for you is to help you live healthier and help you live longer. I want to be part of that catalyst that helps you unlock the 10 to 20 years or more you never knew you had. You know you have them now, right? So now we've got to start to put the work in motion to make that happen. Another goal that I want to have, and this is the whole premise of the work that Dr. Nipping, as an example, and Dr. Mixon are doing, is he wants to move people from that red line to the green line and turn the torture years into vital bonus years. And I want to provide you with the tools to make immediate, positive, and permanent changes in your life. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by introducing you to these revolutionary components. We've seen 2 of them thus far, and we're going to work on a couple more as we go through our exercises. And some of those components that are coming up will be the Vital Life List and the Complete Wealth Ecosystem. You've already been introduced to the Possibilities Explosion worksheet. We've already done at least one rapid reset, and coming up in some future webinars, we'll be working on the Vital Life List as well as the Complete Wealth Ecosystem. That is a more in-depth version of the video that you got to watch with Mark. So let's talk a little bit about what's coming up, which will be lesson number 5, Habits of Successful Centenarians. There is a workbook and there is a worksheet. It's a quiz. I have had some reports that some of that information for some individuals might be a little blurry. If you are one of those individuals that is experiencing kind of a blurry download, let me know and I can email you a cleaner copy of that. I think that we addressed that, and I think that it's been cleaned up when we did the new refresh and added the Ideal Life 360 co-brand to that work. But if you have a problem, let me know. Watch the video, and as I always say, the intent of the worksheet is for you to pay attention. It may not be a word for word fill in the blank. It's generally to make sure that you're, 1, paying attention, number 2, that you're writing it down, and that really helps with ingraining that into your mind, and as well as having recall. And then if you have questions anytime between the time that we're together, please submit questions. Speaking of questions, I'd like to open up the chat box and see if there are any questions that we have. There is a question that was submitted before last time that I forgot to answer. And I think I have since answered that via email, but it may be something that some people on the call are thinking about. And that is that in some of the past videos, there's this concept called the gym. And Mark refers to the gym. Let me share with you that in the early stages, when the original videos were recorded by Mark, the direction of the Vital Lifelong Alignment was set on a path that was a little bit different. It was going to be mostly an online, self-driven sort of program. What we've uncovered is the reason that we're doing these webinars is that there's more benefit in providing the material in the format that we're providing it in, and providing one-on-one coaching for those individuals who seek that out, than to be completely DIY. So there was this concept of creating this online app or online program that would provide that. That has not been pursued. So as a result of that, essentially what we have are the written transformational learning exercises and worksheets and workbooks. So what are those? Again, we talked about that possibility explosion exercise, the rapid reset, the Vital Life List, and the Complete Wealth Ecosystem are what would basically essentially be our version of the gym. So there is no app, there is no online program associated with that. So thank you very much for asking that particular question. As we come close to the end of our time today, I just want to ask if there are any further questions that anybody has, or any experiences. Or let me ask this question: would anybody be willing to share if there is a myth that you have bought into, that you're living into, that today's presentation has perhaps changed your mind or brought some additional perspective to that. If you're willing to share that and put that in the chat box, I'll just throw that out as one of those. I think many of you know that I fall into that category of successful centenarianism. And that, I guess the good news is it didn't take me all the way until I was age 50 to realize I was making a change. But one of the reasons I was so enthusiastic about this program is that I saw a lot of myself in the culturally conforming conveyor belt. And not only did I consider it to be dangerous for me, but I considered it dangerous if I were to continue to perpetuate that. As you know, and again, we talk about, you know, parents and clergy and media and that. Well, the same is true for financial advisors. If I'm perpetuating to you the wrong course of thinking, then I'm not helping. I'm hurting. So not only for myself, but for our practice, we wanted to make sure that we are embodying the concepts around longevity, embodying the concepts around the Vital Life Lung Alignment, so that we are serving our clients in the best way possible. And I've got Jennifer who says, my high performance years are 50 to 80. So that's great. The best is yet to come, the way that we put that. So this will be kind of the final call. Any questions or comments that people have? If you're willing to share them in the chat box, that's great. If you'd like to provide me some feedback privately, obviously you know how to get a hold of me. That's brad@ideallife360.com. I always look forward to feedback, good or bad. We want to make sure that this is an incredibly positive experience for you. And if there are ways that we can make it even better for you, please do not be shy. All right, it doesn't look like that we've got any takers for the chat box. So people are being introspective this morning and thinking about all the things that we've presented here today. Again, next week will be Lesson 5, Habits of the Successful Centenarians. Fun workshop. Looking forward to presenting that. And we will see you next time.